And ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon on this Friday afternoon, and a very good morning to you, Pierre Kory, and who just made you wake up early and to basically do this interview. How are you doing? Are you doing today?
Good. I'm getting there, Vincent. First coffee down. I'm a little bit into my second, and I'll catch up to your always incredible energy. But I'm doing
Okay.
all right.
Well, we're going to talk today an update interview on Ivermectine. We talked already 2 times. Since then, a lot happened. I mean, for the people who do not know, Pierre Kory is an ICU medical specialist, and then he's part of the FLCCC, the frontline. How do you say that?
COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance.
Yeah, the
rolls off the tongue.
COVID-19 Critical Frontier Critical Line Alliance. Okay, he's been involved in getting treatment for COVID because we don't have treatment. In the first line and in the second line, he's been very effectively promoting Ivermectin. He went for the Parliament of the United States, the Senate. He went for the WHO, for the NIH. And he's been promoting it with his group of people ever since. So there's 2 interviews where he basically explains why ivermectin is a very good way to treat COVID-19. And we're going to do an update on all of that. I mean, where we stand, why it's not a generalized accepted treatment. I also want to share what happened in the Netherlands. We want to talk about some new research from Columbia, the Bill and the Gates Foundation, who basically said they will research it. So we're going to just do an update of it, Pierre. Okay, and so the first thing, yesterday you had a press conference where you basically shared the latest information. I will send that in the chat to share with you. But basically, can you tell me what you shared yesterday at the press conference?
Yeah. So the thing I want to emphasize, it wasn't just me. So it was a panel. We brought together an international panel because, I'm not alone in my advocacy. There, certainly the amount of clinicians and specialists around the world who know the efficacy of ivermectin and COVID is numerous, right? And so there's been different folks who've been advocating within their different countries. And so yesterday I was on a panel with Dr. Tess Lowry from the United Kingdom. She's actually an expert researcher that she's been working for the WHO as a consultant doing reviews of medicines for decades. She also does systematic reviews for the Cochrane Library, which is a prominent medical journal that researches medicines. And so she's an expert. So she's done a review on ivermectin, and she and her group put together an international meeting. Have you heard of the BIRD conference, Vincent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You heard of the BIRD conference, right? The British Ivermectin Recommendation Development Panel. And they came up with a recommendation that ivermectin should be deployed immediately. So Tess was there representing her group in the UK. We had Dr. Eli Schwartz from Israel, who just completed an extremely well done, sophisticated, double-blind, randomized controlled trial showing profound benefits in eradicating the virus. And he's a tropical medicine expert and an expert on ivermectin. We also had Hector Carvalho, who did some of those landmark prophylaxis or prevention trials. The big trials from Argentina where they showed that if you took ivermectin every week, nobody got sick. And then we had Dr. Mark Wadeley. Have you spoken with Mark, Vincent?
Yes, I've interviewed Mark. He's in Belgium. An extremely outspoken scientist who basically warned the government that they were not serious enough about COVID, wanted to have much more stricter guidelines, and then he basically published an article saying, hey, if we all use ivermectin in 6 weeks, basically the Belgians will be will released from COVID, and of course he got a lot of flack for that. But I interviewed him also. Yeah.
So he joined us as well because I've noticed his advocacy, and I mean he's an expert of coronavirus. He's been studying. He's a virologist, and he's also he understands epidemiology, and he's as expert on the ivermectin evidence as anyone. And so he was a great voice. So it was a very broad international panel. It was great. I mean, we had a lot of media attendance, mostly international, very little U.S. We could talk about that for hours, but the U.S. has like an iron curtain around ivermectin.
Well,
but
I
it was
mean, I
really
think it's true. I mean, what you see, Pierre, it's very well accepted in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America. It's not accepted in the West. It's not accepted in the West. It's not in fact accepted in the UK. It's not accepted in Europe. It's not accepted in America. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk
insufficient
about
evidence, Vince. Insufficient evidence.
Insufficient evidence. Insufficient evidence.
I'm gonna get a tattoo of that. It's gonna be on my arm. Insufficient evidence.
Yeah. Well, since I've been talking about ivermectin and trying to figure out what I think about it, I mean, I've been talking to about 20, 30 doctors, and that's the only thing they basically can repeat. They don't read the evidence themselves. They just read the review of the NIH or the WHO or some doctor association, and that's information about 6 or 9 months ago, and they say, oh well,
Vince,
no, that's not enough.
What you're saying is amazing. I'm glad that you said that, because I'm just going to say briefly, I am shocked at the echo chamber. One guy says something which is superficial, inexpert, shows no knowledge of the evidence base, and everybody parrots it. It just goes and goes and goes and goes. Why are people not investigating and reading? It's tiring. It's tiring.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to tell you, Pierre, there's finally been a very reliable research about ivermectin, and let me share it with you, because I've been talking to all the big newspaper in the Netherlands about ivermectin, and then of course they said the same thing. Oh, there's not enough evidence, but now there is enough evidence. Here, look at this. This is a Dutch magazine who says this beautiful ivermectin does nothing against corona. That's basically because in Jama, in Jama, it was mentioned there's been a research, and that's the first real solid study to the evidence done by Maarten Keulemans, who is the scientific editor of the Volkskrant, which is one of the biggest newspaper here. And it was really interesting what they said about that interview. He says everybody wanted to know about it, but all the other research was not good enough. But this is good enough, and this basically shows that in mild cases, ivermectin has no use. And basically they made that, they say, the most wonderful miracle stuff, ivermectin does nothing against corona. So this is basically how they review it. So let's talk about this a little bit. I mean, it's interesting. If you have positive stuff about ivermectin, it doesn't get published. If it's one negative, it immediately everywhere it was on the front page.
So Vincent, can I say that? So I'm going to tell you something before we talk about this Jama trial. Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Ahmed El-Ghazar in Egypt, he did a prospective randomized controlled trial. It was open label, 600 patients.
Yeah.
200 were in prevention trial, 400 in treatment. And it shows a dramatic reduction in need for hospitalization as well as mortality.
Yeah, but I mean,
come on.
Let
me just finish my point. Vince, you keep interrupting me. Let me finish my point because you don't get what I'm saying.
Okay.
What I want to tell you is he has been trying to publish his paper for 4 months. He's been rejected from Nature, Lancet, Respirology, Chest. He cannot publish that paper. So your point about how Jama very proudly publishes a paper which supposedly showed that ivermectin worked, that's actually not true. If you look at the paper, it actually shows quite credible evidence that ivermectin likely worked. It just wasn't a big enough trial. The patients weren't very sick. But it's clear that there's a bias against ivermectin. He can't publish his trial in a pandemic showing dramatic mortality benefits. No journal will publish a large prospective randomized controlled trial, but Jama very happily publishes this one. It's nonsense.
Yeah. Pierre, I was rudely interrupting you, and I apologize.
It's okay.
I see it's not good for your blood pressure.
We're among friends, Vince.
I just wanted to tell you, just by mentioning the word Egypt, a randomized trial in Egypt, it renders it useless in the Western world. It doesn't.
Ethnocentrism, Vince.
Yes.
You know what that means?
Okay. Yes. Of course, of course. So let's talk a little bit about that trial, which basically first is this Jama network. Is that a serious network? Is that a serious
Yeah.
place to publish articles?
I don't even know how to answer that. So Jama, let's say, I'm going to answer it this way. It's a very prominent journal.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's serious. The
Okay.
stuff that they publish is really, again, I don't want to condemn it completely as a journal because there's fine stuff that gets published, but there's plenty of stuff where I really scratch my head what they're doing.
Okay, so let's talk about this research from Columbia. How do you look at that? There's 400 patients which basically had a randomized control test.
So this trial is fascinating to me. First of all, before I give you my comments, if you look at the comments on that page of doctors who read the paper and comment on it underneath, the doctors absolutely kill it. I mean, they absolutely criticize this trial over and over and over again. Nobody finds it a credible trial. So that's point one. The way I look at this trial is that, so I've always said this when I'm studying interventions, when you look at medications and see if they work, I use this phrase, you cannot find an effect of a medicine in the mild or the moribund. Moribund means the dying patient. So if someone's actively dying, there are no medicines that work. And if someone is well or getting well, it's hard to show that anything works because they're going to get well anyway. So when you're looking at those two extremes, it's very hard to detect an effect. This trial was in the mildly ill. And when you look at it, it's 400 patients. Average age was 37 years old. Average, which means many were younger than 37. And we know those patients do well no matter what. Number two, the investigators, they predicted that out of the 400, around 72 to 80 patients would deteriorate. And they were hoping of those 72 to 80, they would see a difference between groups. Do you know how many people actually deteriorated out of the 400? 12.
12. Okay.
12. So when
so
you're
3%
to detect a benefit of a medicine, you only have 12 patients to compare it on because out of the rest of the 400 got better. Okay. So when they saw that almost nobody was getting sick in the trial, they changed their endpoint. But here's the thing. Out of the 12, 4 got ivermectin, 8 got placebo. Did not reach statistical significance, so you can't say too much about it. Fine. But basically nobody got sick. That's number one. Number two, and this is a major deal, and there's a lot of controversy around this. There's a lot of people up in arms. But it appears that in this trial, the consent form did not state that the medicine that was being studied was ivermectin. There's reports saying that the consent form actually calls the medicine by a number, that they're studying something like LK7721. Yeah. And so the people in the trial didn't know that they were actually being studied on ivermectin. They were allowed to take other therapies at home. And in Cali at that time, everybody was taking ivermectin. There was, I think, 2 doses per every patient in Cali was being sold, and the mayor was telling everyone to take ivermectin. And when you look at the side effects in the trials, is the last thing I'm going to say, what a lot of people have been writing about is if you look at the side effects being reported, the most common ones, which is sort of diarrhea and dizziness, they are seen in COVID, but these were really prominent in this trial, and they were equal between groups. And many people are saying it looks like both groups were on ivermectin. The last thing I'm going to say is when you look at the results of the trial, in the trial itself, the investigators say, we switched our endpoint from the rates of deterioration to the time to resolution. The trial, we estimate that we can detect a difference of 3 days in the time to resolution.
Yeah.
Guess what they found? They found that there was an improvement of 2 days in the ivermectin group. So it didn't reach statistical significance because it wasn't large enough to, because nobody was really that sick. But they found a difference of 2 days. It didn't reach statistical significance. But the crime here is what you have highlighted right there, Vince. I find this is absolutely unconscionable. The way that they wrote the conclusions to this paper is so ridiculous. The only conclusion that you could have said is we were unable to detect, or we were unable to determine efficacy of this drug in this trial. You shouldn't say that these findings do not support the use. In fact, they do support the use. You had less people deteriorate. You had people getting better faster. It just didn't reach statistical significance. What is this nonsense that these findings do not support the use? I mean, I just find that I don't know, Vince. Someday I'll tell you how I really feel.
Yes. Okay. I'm looking forward to that day.
That was
Pierre.
today, by the way.
But it
That's
was
a joke.
really interesting. Yeah, I understand. It was really interesting. I was just making a joke. Anyway, but it was really interesting that this research was published wildly all over the world. It went to the New York Times. It went everywhere. So why is that? Do you have any idea why? Do you have any?
Kidding me? Vincent, the naysayers. So there are so many scientists and regulatory bodies and so-called experts and public health leaders who have already staked their position on ivermectin, and they're holding fast to that. Vincent, you know the human condition. We have difficulty saying that we made a mistake. We have difficulty admitting that we might not have known everything that we should have. We might not have been perfect in our guidance. So there's a huge psychology and ego, and that's only one of the things against ivermectin. But those naysayers who have already determined that it doesn't work, this trial was like a godsend. It was basically giving ammunition to the naysayers. Meanwhile, if you look at the trial, it's actually not ammunition, but they all used it. And I just heard a report yesterday that apparently in the WHO, who's right now in the middle of a review, apparently this paper is actually influencing them. Now they're starting to cool a little bit on ivermectin. It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, so it is really interesting how difficult it is to get a good trial and to get it accepted into the first world medicine world. I mean, that is not easy, right? I mean, if you have a medicine which is really widely used in the third world, it is difficult to get it accepted in the first world. You need a test from the right parties in that first world.
The right institutions. So this what you just described, Vincent, has been reported on for a couple of decades, which is that research from low-income countries is almost impossible to publish in high-impact journals from high-income countries. They don't look at the research that comes out of low-income countries. You need some prestigious institution that's on the shores of a European or North American country.
Okay, right. So let's go step back. I looked at your website and I saw that you made a little introduction video about yourself and about the FLCCC.
Yeah,
and
the
I
team
suggest.
did that.
Yeah, and I thought that was a really nice thing. So I'm going to, for everybody who doesn't know Pierre and who doesn't know the FLCCC, I'm going to basically show you a 2-minute introduction video, which I thought was really well put together, Pierre. So
well, that's credit to the team. They did a good job. There's a video team that works hard on this stuff.
Yeah, I think so too. Let's see if I can go to this.
I'm a lung specialist. I'm an ICU specialist. I've cared for more dying COVID patients than anyone can imagine. They're dying because they can't breathe. Early treatment is key. Treatment is key. We need to offload the hospitals. We are tired. I can't keep doing this.
So what I'm going to be talking today is I'm going to be talking about COVID-19, the spectrum of disease.
COVID and the FLCCC starts with Paul. You know, what happened was some doctors reached out to Paul because I think they knew him. They knew he was, an out-of-the-box thinker. They said, hey, Dr. Merrick, you got to do something to figure out this disease and come up with a protocol, right?
And then I knew Umberto, because Umberto's the steroid king. And then Jose Iglesias was my fellow, really smart guy. So I thought, these guys are at the bedside. They understand COVID. Why don't we just kind of have a little chitty-chatty together? So that's kind of how it evolved.
It just a little structure developed around that, and then structure and then process. Like, I think we just started acting like the FLCCC, which is papers and papers and papers. We'd send this paper and that paper. We started talking with Jose and Joseph, and we were just reading more papers. We were trying to learn as much as we could out of China.
The guidelines coming out were, there's no treatment, it's symptomatic care, which was absurd because the mortality was like 86%.
And we've never, that is not something we see in critical care. We don't see 86% mortality.
When you look at the mortality and morbidity of this disease, which is unparalleled, we are seeing countless deaths, and it's horrific the way they're dying.
Please do not underestimate this disease. So we have to put our emphasis on the prevention and early treatment of this disease.
And you look at these safe and low-cost agents, it seems like a no-brainer that you should try it.
And then obviously the ivermectin story is just truly an astonishing story. I think people will look back with disbelief how we could have allowed this misinformation to propagate.
And here's the thing about ivermectin, going back to ivermectin, because you know that is my message today. It has an unparalleled safety profile with almost no side effects.
I don't think there's a single person on this planet who hasn't been affected one way or other. There's no monetary compensation which can reward you for saving someone's life. And I also think we can make a difference. So we just have to keep on fighting, because we just have to do the right thing.
Okay, so that was the story of you guys getting together. You found a number of things which helped with COVID in the ICU, and you helped in the stuff which helps in the first line. And ivermectin is one of the most important part of that. Everybody wants to know what you're doing. It's the website has also improved quite a bit, I must say. The FLCCC site. So that's nice. Let's take a look at your website and tell everybody, if you want to know more about it, what are the important parts.
Yeah.
So first, can you describe the most important articles? I mean,
So first off, let me just show real quick at the top on the gray menu bar across. So the IMASS protocol is our outpatient treatment protocol. Math Plus is for more severely ill hospital patients. And then we have some really important papers, and then we have something about Join Our Alliance. But as you said, as you go down, I do have to make a small pitch, Vincent. If you go back up, see that red button that says donate to support our mission? I hate doing this, but I have to tell you, our operation has grown. We are working around the clock. We actually got a pretty big support by a couple of generous supporters. That money has been burned through, and we are getting more and more asks of us. So if anyone out there thinks they like the work that we're doing and thinks that we're making a historic impact, which I think we are, please help that initiative. I can't tell you how overwhelmed we are. So anyway, if you go back, I'm sorry to make a money pitch, Vincent. I hate that stuff. I really don't want to talk about money, but I have to for the cause.
Yeah. And I think it's completely. I think it's completely okay. So we're going to do that. Yeah. So that is basically because I mean, in terms of money, ivermectin is not a money-making medicine, right?
No.
I mean, it's not that if you're going to make a killing if everybody starts accepting ivermectin, because it's an out of patent medicine. It's available everywhere for cheap. You are not making any money of beating the drum of ivermectin in any way, shape, or form.
We're a non-profit organization. Nobody's making any money. We're a humanitarian organization with a mission. We have a couple of missions. Our original mission, we've been around for almost a year now, was to develop the most effective treatment protocols for COVID. And we did that. We first developed the Math Plus protocol for the hospital. And can I mention one thing, Vincent? Do you know, I don't know if you know this, do you know that that was the second time I testified in the Senate?
Yeah, I heard. Yeah, I know it. Yeah, I know that you did.
The reason why I bring that up,
because the first time you did this, this one, the math protocol, and you basically were ridiculed. Yeah.
The first time I told the world that corticosteroids were critical in saving lives, and I was ridiculed for 2 months until the trials supposedly proved that it was life-saving, and now it's the standard of care. And so I already did that back in May, and now I'm doing the same thing again with ivermectin, except the ivermectin story is a lot harder to get people to understand, but we're getting there. Anyway, on the website, you asked for the important papers. If you blow it up again, Vincent, if you could.
Yeah.
We do a weekly update. That's that little bar there to the left. Every Wednesday night at 7, what's called Eastern or New York City time, at 7 p.m. I usually do updates, most recent studies, other things that have happening, new advances, new country adoptions. And then in the middle, underneath the donate, if you go under, there's a how to get ivermectin, and that's really for more for the U.S. because how to get ivermectin varies in different countries. But we have that's probably the number one question that is asked of us by far. And so we give some advice. We give materials you can print out to show to your physician.
And you have this, and you even have doctors who basically are willing to give a prescription.
Yep. And
don't they get into trouble with this kind of stuff?
No. So that's a good question, Vincent. So, although it's not FDA approved for COVID, it's an FDA approved medicine for scabies and for other parasitic diseases. And in the US, you can prescribe a medicine, what's called off-label. About 20% of prescriptions in the United States are off-label. So it's a very common thing. I've been prescribing ivermectin off-label, and many doctors have as well. So it's an easy thing to prescribe. You just have to find the right doctor who understands the field, understands the illness, understands the medicine.
So shouldn't you have I presume you have a bunch of volunteers, right?
So we do. So in our organization, you mean?
Yes. So I presume, and I presume if you ask for the Netherlands or Europe, shouldn't you have a page like this for doctors? If you want to have somebody who can prescribe it in Belgium or in Holland because we have doctors who will do that, and I have the same question. I get the same question all the time.
So I would love to expand that page to other countries. We do have volunteers. We're completely overwhelmed. I have to tell you, we are barely getting through the day as it is. But if there was someone who reached out to us from the Netherlands, for instance, said, hey, I would love to, try to do some research and put together a list for you for your website, I'd be more than happy to put that on. So I'm glad that you brought that up. If there are people who are willing to help in different countries to provide, a resource for patients who are looking for doctors who would prescribe, we'd be happy to share that. I think that's important information for patients. And we keep put our patients first. So
I know a couple of doctors. I will make a list of a couple of doctors who will do that. But it is a very tricky thing. I know of doctors who basically prescribe it, but of course, if you put your name on a list like that, then you're basically coming out in the open. But for now, even though it is also the same thing here, you can basically prescribe off-label medicine. But there has been no repercussions in America for this activity.
No.
Okay.
None at all.
Okay, good. Let's go back to the page because people have to see a couple of pages. They're really important.
If you look at the middle bar with those green boxes, those are just various what we call essential documents. So one is the first one is the IMAS protocol. You can go there and look at the protocol. Below that is the Math Plus, and that just shows you what the protocol is, the doses. So if you go down, you press the U.S., for instance, the U.S. flag there, prophylaxis and early treatment. Yeah, and this is the protocol. It just gives you the doses, some of the supplements that we recommend, different strategy for early if you're sick or if you're prophylaxing. And then similar.
And the prophylaxing is really important when you have somebody in your home who is basically has COVID-19 and you don't want to have it. At that moment on, it's really a very sound, sane strategy to basically give this to other people, right?
Yeah, and you had mentioned, I think you've helped people with that. So if you look at a prophylaxis protocol, there's really two of them, right? One is if you're a high-risk individual, elderly, comorbidities, have other illnesses, those patients don't do well, right? So if you can go back up a little bit, Vincent.
Oh, sorry.
Right there, prophylaxis protocol. So that's for high-risk individuals. It's a 1 dose today, 1 dose in 2 days, and then you just regularly take 1 dose every 2 weeks. And then under that is what you talked about, which is post-COVID-19 exposure prophylaxis. So if you have a household member who got sick, the other household members should take ivermectin. Very few of them will get sick. You really will protect most of them. It's impossible to protect all because by the time one gets sick, the others have already been exposed. So you're always a few days late. But even with that few days delay, you can prevent others from getting sick. And then the treatment under there. If you could click on the FAQ menu on the left or on the right of the screen. Yeah, if you go down there, FAQ, I just think this is also an important page for people because they have so many questions. And if you scroll down, I have about 20 questions that I answer there that you can click on various aspects of the ivermectin, various questions that people have asked. And so the most common questions I've put text there to answer. So in case people have questions and want to go to the website, please do.
Yeah. So that is very useful. And then if people want to get into the, if they want to get into not only the prevention, the protocol, they basically also, you have a couple of extra pages to it.
Yeah, we have our papers, my manuscript and whatnot. Hey, Vincent, did we talk about my manuscript?
No, we didn't talk about your manuscript.
Did you know? Did you know there's big news this week?
No, I heard that something was basically given on putting on a website and then withdrawn. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, yes, but there's a more positive development. Yes. Anyway, if we'll finish with the website, then I can tell you about that. But our paper is right there. It's next.
What is the paper? What is the paper? Which one is the paper?
It's the third green box down. That's it, right there. That's our paper.
Yeah, and then also you have you also have a one-page summary, right?
Exactly. That's to print out and give to your doctor who may not have time, but it just lists like the number of studies and what they show, and the overwhelming evidence and support. And so we and then below that is really cool. That's Dr. Marek's clinical guide. It's a huge document. But it's so brilliant. It shows just what an awesome doctor Dr. Marek is. I mean, it's just so detailed. It shows his approach to the disease, his understanding of the phases, how he titrates medicines, the different things that he employs, the sicker that the patients become. I mean, that's like a master class in taking care of a severely ill patient. It is brilliant. But that's really only for high-end doctors, and usually the ICU specialist would read that to its entirety.
Okay, so this is not for a first line doctor.
It's really much more geared towards a physician. It's like almost it's like the master textbook of how to keep someone alive who's very sick with COVID. It's great. It's great. So any physicians out there, you want to read something by a master physician, that's the document to read.
Yeah. So this is the. And I read this. I read a part of it, and at a certain point, you lost me, but it's fine.
Right.
But also, it's full with very practical advice. Okay, so this is one. So this is one thing. This is one extra article, and but most people have enough of that one-page thing or the article around it. And if you want to go deeper again. You can go deeper again and then basically go to the research which proves all this, right? I mean, you have also you've also integrated that in the website.
Yep. And so those are the main things. And then below that is news and updates. And then, for people who want to see our videos, we have a video link up there. We have different patient testimonials, physician testimonials. I think they're really they're very compelling. And we also have a YouTube channel where we have a ton of patient videos. If you go down and look at that Black, brown, and elderly people video, that's a really compelling video. I don't know if you got to watch that, Vincent, but that one is really powerful.
Let's take one which I thought was really interesting because
please.
you also helped some. Louis Gossett, an actor, I think.
Yep.
And so let's listen to him for 1 minute or for 1 minute. Can you hear the sound? Can you hear the sound, Pierre?
No sound. I can't hear the sound.
Okay, then that was my mistake. I always have to press the right thing. But I thought he was really a nice. He was really nice. Person.
He's a lovely man. Lovely man.
And he's very known. He's
a phenomenal actor.
Yeah.
I felt that something was wrong. I could hardly breathe. And slowly but surely, I got sicker and sicker. I was diagnosed, of course, as COVID. And they put me in this emergency ward. And I looked in the eyes of the doctors and the nurses, and they were so tired and so stressed out. And I looked around the room and I said, this might be the last room I'll be on earth. Let me get out of here. So I fought it day and night, and I got this avalanche of well wishes. I was blown away. I was touched. People around the world, I call them angels. And one of those angels, they called and said, I have something for you. And so I took it because I had nothing really to lose. I was desperate. I needed to find something. I couldn't walk. To make a long story short, here I am sitting here telling you my story in pretty nice health. That ivermectin interrupted a process that was doing me harm. And ivermectin is one of those things that's already been here. We use it now for the conquering of COVID-19. I'm very grateful for all of you for literally saving my life.
I thought this was a nice way to show. I mean, that you're actually these are people. They're desperate. They basically have problems with their lungs. They feel threatened. They think they're going to die, and then ivermectin is just like, it is a weird idea. I mean, I got a lot of criticism in the Netherlands that I basically am promoting this ivermectin, and then I got about 200 people sending me that article which shows that ivermectin doesn't work. And they basically they're really looking for a reason that it doesn't work. Or they're afraid. I think they're afraid to basically to allow it that something as simple as that could help, because ivermectin was talked about a year ago. In February, March, ivermectin was already talked to a lot of doctors. I mean, it basically became very prominent when you testified. But before that, already it was talked about with a lot of doctors. And it's so weird that if something like this is available, we could have saved a lot of people's lives. We could have opened up society earlier. It is mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling that this kind of stuff is happening. So anyway, I thought this was a good testimonial. Let me ask you, before we move further, let me ask you, how is COVID treatment doing in America? How are the hospitals doing? How is the amount of cases is dropping? Your vaccines is rising. How do you assess the situation?
Yeah. So vaccines are going at a pretty brisk pace. They're going to hit 100 million apparently very soon at 100 days after very much. Yeah, by mid-April, I think they're going to get to around 100 million late April. The cases and deaths have been falling. November, December, January was the peak. They were astronomically high. We had near collapse of some areas in the healthcare system. So, for instance, Los Angeles County was the stories you heard out of Los Angeles County were just indescribable. They were putting patients in gift shops in the hospital with beds. And so, but we've moved away from that. From what I hear, the amount of cases in the hospitals are manageable now. They're much lower than they had been. And so it's much more manageable. But if you look historically, the cases are still quite high. I mean, just yesterday and today, it was 60,000 cases a day. Last week, it had dropped down into the 40s to 50s. Now, last couple of days, we're at 60,000. And so, it's not dropping to zero. There's a lot of places which drop to almost zero. So if you look at the places with widespread ivermectin use, they're approaching pre-pandemic levels with very.
Give me one, Peru or something like that.
So Uttar Pradesh is a big one. Another one is Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has done extremely well in terms of deaths, and that's they recently in the last 2 months massively imported ivermectin. And began using it widely. We have all these graphs that we've followed.
But Zimbabwe didn't have any cases at all, right? I mean, India has also always been. Look at do you see the graphs now, which I'm showing?
Yeah, well, so India is doing some of the best in the world, and the reason for that is we think the biggest reason is absolutely widespread ivermectin use. I don't know if you have Zimbabwe, but Zimbabwe was having.
Do you see it here? Here's Zimbabwe.
Yeah, and what is that? Cases or deaths? Yeah, those are cases.
That's confirmed cases per. That's confirmed cases. So look, they are 2.25 per million people, and they don't have a good healthcare system. That's
Right.
definitely true.
But if you look at deaths for them, it's a much different story. They had peaked in deaths around. They had very high deaths, 70 deaths per day at one point, which rapidly dropped. If you look,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the January, I don't know what they're measuring there, but that was quite a peak. And then they imported ivermectin, used it widely, and the numbers absolutely plummeted.
I can see that, yeah. And India is nothing. India is nothing, and it's a huge place.
Some of the best in the world in India, and ivermectin is widely used there.
Do you have any explanation why the U.S. and the U.K. and the Netherlands? Well, look, this is the U.S., but the United Kingdom, they went absolutely berserk. I mean, we had huge numbers. You know, this is deaths per million. United Kingdom was number one. Germany was very high. United States was very high.
Yep.
The Netherlands were about half of it. Do you have any explanation why that is? Why that second wave came up so heavily?
You know, there's a number of articles on that. There's a whole bunch of reasons, right? Is it new, more virulent variants? Is it the loosening of lockdowns? People are tired. They're not behaving as well. Is it seasonal? I mean, there's a whole bunch of variables that are mixed up. But you said it yourself, Vince, in the beginning. If you look at the European and U.S. countries, I really think that ivermectin is a big factor. And one thing I want to point out is I've read at least 4 long-form journalist articles that try to answer the question, why is there so much variation around the world? And why is Africa and India and other parts doing so well against COVID? In each article, in major media publications, the word ivermectin never appears. Never appears. And I can't believe that these journalists did that much research and nobody ever whispered the word ivermectin into their ear and looked at it. Now, the story of Peru is fascinating, Vincent. So Peru is one of the best examples of controlling COVID with ivermectin. But what was fascinating about Peru is that the administration changed in around mid-November. They had extremely low rates.
Yeah.
And in mid-November, the administration changed. The new president, new health minister, they stopped the military campaign, which was distributing ivermectin throughout the country. And the cases skyrocketed back up to some of the highest in the world. So Peru is on your list now. So if you look at this year, since December, now you're showing India, but before you saw Peru is going nuts. And Peru is a place that actually already controlled it with ivermectin, but the new administration does not believe it works. They're listening to the ivory tower city doctors who think the rural doctors and the people's potion is nonsense, and they stop distributing it. Because
now we see that they are that they have high cases. Yeah,
of course it's completely out of control in Peru again. And again, Vincent, that term, insufficient evidence.
Yeah. What about if we talk about inefficient evidence? We are wondering here about what's the evidence of the lockdown measurements. I mean, the interesting thing, you have red states and you have blue states. And all the red states are opening up and all the blue states are saying, hey, don't do that. It's extremely dangerous. I mean, it seems almost a politicalized issue. How do you view that?
Yeah, so I got to say I'm not a lockdown expert, so I don't want to give definitive statements against lockdowns. But here's my general sense of it. I think lockdowns might work if they're like, and this, I'm not proposing these, but if you look at what they did in Wuhan when this broke down, they extinguished that epidemic in no time at all. But that was like a militant lockdown with massive contact. It was just like all hands on lockdown, military contact tracing, anything moved, anything squeaked, and they extinguished it. So if you do that kind of lockdown, that appears effective. The other kind of lockdowns which we do, which don't have all those supporting interventions, they don't appear to be that effective. And if you look at some of the red states, so, one of the telling examples, if you look at California, which was hugely proponents of lockdowns, and Florida, which kind of went nuts and let everyone out, Florida hasn't done worse. In fact, they've done better. And the other thing is in Peru, because I've studied Peru a bit with Juan Chimie, who does all those beautiful epidemiologic analyses. When he looks at Peru, every time there was a lockdown, cases went up. And so, with keeping people confined in their houses, with a little bit of forays, the case went up. And then as mobility increased, because you can actually track mobility amongst the population using Google. It's actually a publicly available database. And so you can see, how much mobility is going on by cell phone data. And it seemed that they did not correlate. And so I think certain times the lockdowns might work. I think the others, I think it's most important. I think masks is most important. I really think masks, not outside. Masks outside is collective insanity. That there's no reason to wear a mask outside unless you're like in stagnant air in like a huge rock concert crowd. Outside, there's zero risk of getting it. Inside, in any type of confined condition for prolonged periods or with poor ventilation, they're critical. But I think masks are important inside. I don't, I haven't been convinced of the lockdowns.
Yeah. No, so it's really interesting. There's also a lot of papers basically looking at all the different relationship between the number of cases, number of deaths, and the harshness of the lockdown measurements. And it's very difficult to find any kind of relationship. I mean, North and South Dakota in your country is really interesting. They have the same kind of weather, they have the same kind of paper, and one is very strict and one is very loose, and they have exactly the same shape of the form. It doesn't seem that those kinds of measurements are very effective. But I mean, we'll find that out after the whole thing is down. What is your take on vaccines? How effective do they seem to be?
So what I'm hearing is that they're effective as of right now, but that's not the question to answer. I think in the short term they seem to be working for those who get it. The problems is that I don't think the safety is being looked at as thoroughly as it should. I think we need much more data on safety. There are concerning reports on safety. That's number one. But the biggest question is long-term efficacy. The globe somehow came together and decided that a mass vaccination policy across the globe is what we're going to do to combat this pandemic. I don't know that there's proof that that's going to work over the long term. In fact, there's a lot of virologists and epidemiologists and vaccine specialists who've come out saying that that's not going to work in a coronavirus. We're already seeing highly mutable variants. And the big question, are the vaccines going to hold up against these mutations?
And we don't know yet.
Strong opinions, but I think I want to see where we go with this. Listen, my hopes are that the vaccines are safe and have long-term efficacy, but that remains to be seen. So like you said, we need more data on the lockdowns. We need more data on the vaccines.
Did you vaccinate? Were you able to get a vaccination yourself? And
No, I haven't gotten vaccinated yet. One of the reasons is I don't have an appointment at a hospital right now because I'm working /volunteering. I've been taking a stipend, but we ran out of money, so I'm going back to volunteering. But I just work for the FLC. I'm at my desk 20 hours a day, Vincent. But no, I just take Ivermectin. But I'm going to go back in the ICU in April.
And then, would you, if you have the option to basically get it in the hospital, would you take a vaccine, and which one?
I am. If I have to take a vaccine, I would take the Janssen one, the adenovirus one, just because it's been around longer. It's been around longer. More familiar with it.
You know where it was made, Janssen?
No, where?
In the Netherlands, little country between England and Germany. Okay.
Yeah, I've heard of the Netherlands. Yeah, it's a cool country. I've been there.
Yeah. So that's but that new NMRA, you just want to study the long-term effects.
Listen, some people, I just want, I'm a data guy. So the more data I have, the better I feel. And so for me, I like data. So I just want more data on it first.
Okay. Hey, can we take a question of the audience?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So why isn't Merck basically the manufacturer of most of the ivermectin? And it's actually produced in the Netherlands, in Haarlem, here not far, about 10 kilometers from here. They make billions and billions of pills. And why is Merck not totally enthusiastic about this ivermectin? Because you're promoting their stuff.
So, number one, I am not promoting their stuff. Ivermectin is now an agent, a drug of the world. It's on the WHO's list of essential medicines. It no longer belongs to Merck. Merck makes no money off of ivermectin. That was the old Merck. The question, why isn't Merck all on board with this? I cannot come up with any other answer, except for the fact that ivermectin is a fearsome competitor to multiple of their products. Not only vaccines, but most importantly, they have an oral antiviral agent that they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on and are trying to bring into the market against COVID. You have a drug called molnupiravir by Merck, where they're heavily invested, and now their favored son, the drug that they gave birth to the world, the gift to the world, for which led to the Nobel Prize winner, is now their enemy. Now, Cain and Abel were the two brothers, right? There's got to be some myth of like the son who goes after the father. So now Merck is looking at ivermectin as a competitor. And I have to tell you, this statement right here, what you're looking at, Vincent, I'm going to tell you, it is my unmistakable opinion, this will go down in history. This was a crime against humanity. I am sorry. What they did there went against at least 6 expert panels in the world. That is an unsupportable recommendation. They gave no data to support it. They put no scientist names to it. It was the most unscientific and egregious pre-marketing promotion of their drug. And for anyone to look at it as anything else is insane. You just don't get what's going on here. So again, I'll tell you how I really feel someday.
Okay. Well, they say our scientists continue to carefully examine the findings of all available and emerging studies, and then they come to this basis. But you say this is a simple question of there's no money into it, because they produce billions of pills, but they give it away for free to Africa and to Latin America, to poor countries, which is a really nice gift.
Yes.
I mean, they basically have been giving this. Merck has to be applauded by doing this. They basically do that as a as a mission to the world, and I think that has been very positive. But you think that they don't want to seriously investigate is because it's threatening other ways of making money?
No, I don't think that. I think if anyone else could come up with a credible argument to support what they did, I'm all ears. The only one I can see is this was an action taken against ivermectin to protect their investments in a competing drug. There's no other way to look at it. And in fact, there's a formal complaint made to the FDA against Merck for what's called pre-marketing promotion, which they're not allowed to do. They cannot promote a drug that has not gotten FDA approval. They have it in the pipeline, it's being tested, but they can't start, and that's viewed as pre-marketing promotion, and a formal complaint was made to the FDA. So let's see what the outcome of is that. I'm not going to hold my breath.
Okay, well, let's talk, since you brought up the FDA, that's also something I wanted to ask you about, because you mean...
No. You're killing me today, Vincent. You're killing me.
So the FDA just came out with a statement that's why you should not use ivermectin to treat or prevent COVID-19. So this is not we don't recommend, or we don't not recommend. We basically are in the middle, like the NIH or the WHO, which is saying we're research. This is a very clear statement. I mean, first, can you tell us what's the difference between the NIH and the FDA? I mean, who's basically regulating what?
So the NIH is more a body. It's sort of like our scientific institution that really regulates research and directs funds towards promoting and advancing science and investigations. Yeah. FDA is much more a regulatory body, where their job is to review the research and see and check for the safety and efficacy in order to approve medicine. So you have one before the other. Now, can we just go back to the picture, Vincent? Because I think we should talk about this picture. Do you see this woman in scrubs with a stethoscope hugging a horse? Can we talk about that?
Well, but I mean, ivermectin is, I mean, in the Netherlands, every horse, every dog, and every cat gets ivermectin once a year, right? I mean, it's the deworming the cure. So I find
get it. So they're basically saying don't use horse ivermectin. And if you read the text of the article, it's insane. Look at some of these what they say. So number one, they say some really crazy stuff. So number one, they're saying that people are going to the hospital after self-medicating. No supporting evidence is given for that. Many people ask them, could you provide the data? They do not have the data. They pointed to a report from the Missouri Poison Control Center, one of the states in the country, that reported increases in poisoning since COVID began. Not necessarily ivermectin specific. Apparently there were 4 reports, but even Missouri will not give the supporting evidence. There's been newspaper articles which have alluded to it. There's no evidence that people have been hospitalized for ivermectin. That's number one. Number two, this article says don't take horse products, and 2, don't overdose with ivermectin. So that's fine if you want to say that, but to say don't use ivermectin is crazy. Now let's look at what's really nuts is in this article, they actually say, go back up, I'll show you where it is. They actually say, we have not reviewed the evidence for ivermectin. Right there. The FDA has not reviewed data to support use of ivermectin in COVID-19 patients to treat or to prevent. However, some initial research is underway. Let's go back to the headline. So here they say they have not reviewed data, but then the headline, what does the headline say? I think the headline reaches a conclusion. This non-review, they somehow didn't review the data, but however, they come up with this headline. Why you should not use ivermectin. So I guess the reason why is because they haven't reviewed the data yet. Whatever. Yeah, I'm so tired.
But I mean, this is serious because I mean, if people use this stuff, then if the FDA says something like that, that goes around the whole world. I mean, that's very serious.
Again, I think this is gonna be historic. I think when all is said and done. And by the way, I keep a record of all of this stuff. I have a timeline of all of this insanity that's going on. And I hope as a historical document, people are going to look back and they're going to see the actions that were taken and how indefensible they are.
Okay. So let's see. I mean, one of the other very important advisory bodies is the NIH, which you basically talked to, right? I mean, you basically went there with Dr. Hill, I think. Yes. And they basically, this is what the scientific part of your society says. And they have proposed mechanism and they have recommendation. They say, we do not, treatment the panel to recommend either for or against the use of ivermectin.
Insufficient evidence, Vincent. Insufficient evidence. Go to the table 2C. You see that link at the top of the screen? No, same screen. Just stay where you are. There's a table 2C link right there. Click that.
This?
In the paragraph above. So I just want to make a point about this. And there's this term that I've been using. In fact, I learned it from Andy Hill. What's happening is the WHO team led by Andy Hill, what they are doing is what's called an active systematic review and meta-analysis. What everybody else, all the European countries, including Netherlands and Belgium and Canada and France, all of their regulatory bodies, you know what they're doing? A passive review of the evidence. Can we define the difference? Active is when, and this is what Andy Hill and his team doing, they have a list of all 59 active randomized controlled trials in the world. They're in weekly contact with all trialists. All trials, as they finish, they are submitting data to his team. He's compiling them and analyzing. He is way ahead of the rest of the world because he's doing an active review of all the randomized controlled trials. All of these other regulatory bodies are just sitting back, waiting for the data to come through peer review and not acting, as if we're in peacetime and not at war. This is just unconscionable. So I don't pay attention to these, I'm going to call them half-assed, lame attempts at reviewing the evidence. When you look at this table, it is a selective collection of trials. It's incomplete. I think there's 11 trials that they mention. It's a bizarre selection of the observational control trials and a bizarre selection of the randomized control trials. They're only looking at the peer review. I think there might be one preprint on there. It is a bizarre selection, but is incomplete, and it has nothing to do. Right now, Andy Hill is sitting on, I think, 27 randomized control trials with over 3,000 patients. That little review there is a joke. It's a joke.
Okay. So that's pretty clear. Let's take one more question from the audience, which of course goes in a different way. So Merck, we had Merck. This is somebody is asking, hey, if I take vaccine and month later there's some kind of a variation of the virus and basically I get infected anyway, can I still take COVID? Can I take ivermectin?
No, ivermectin's an option for anyone ill with COVID. It is an excellent early treatment option. I would take it on first symptoms anytime anyone got sick with COVID, vaccinated or not.
Okay. I have here a question of Jan de Vries. We now have an emergency use of vaccines, right? I mean, it's not. It's just been a preliminary authorization. The question is, if a good treatment would be available, would that vaccine still be allowed under the laws?
So this comes up a lot, and I've had discussions with this with people very experienced and high up in public health in the government, and many people have put forth this argument. I believe it's true if you look at the letter of the law that the EUAs do depend on the lack of an effective treatment. But here's the rub, or here's the kicker, is that in order to remove that EUA, you would have to have, and watch the air quotes, a proven alternative effective treatment. And to prove it, you would probably have to reach FDA approval.
Yeah, of course.
Now, for a competing drug to get full authorization, while you have this increasing number of pharma companies selling vaccines, so you'd have to approve something which now takes away the use of all those vaccines. Now, to approve that, so I think there are going to be a lot of forces against that because it would disturb the vaccine push. Number one. Number two, the FDA has retreated back to their peacetime rules. I think they forget what the E in emergency means, and they are waiting for a many hundred or many thousand patient, placebo-controlled, multi-center, double-blind, randomized controlled trial on ivermectin. And once that's done, probably on US or European shores, all the patient data is fed to them and they review it, then they would be able to give approval to a drug. I am not holding my breath, Vincent.
Okay. So let's go one step further. There's lots of people, especially in America, who are into conspiracy theories and who basically see connections everywhere. This is Mr. Grasshopper. He's saying, hey, he basically doesn't come with a question, but he comes with a statement. Yeah. It's being stalled because so big pharma can develop an home early treatment drugs that can make money for them. I mean, do you think? I mean, if there's anywhere in where basically companies can influence government, it's in the United States. Big money really talks there. But do you think that that the fact that ivermectin isn't approved yet, is that more that nobody's pushing for it because they can make money, but that the other ones, that the normal ways to basically evaluate medicine are turning very slow? Or do you think more a conspiracy kind of thing, that behind this big pharma is trying to do anything they can to stop ivermectin? Or on any other drug? I
think it's absolutely all of the above. It's not even a question, it's all of the above. There are many forces against ivermectin. I would say the most, again, I'm going to go back to my prior answer. The most significant force is the inability of our public health care leaders to have a different way of behavior in a war. They are retreating. to their peacetime regulatory processes, which are Byzantine, very slow, and demand immense amount of highly controlled evidence. Again, you need essentially a trial done by a large academic medical center with many thousands of patients in order for them to approve. They are not looking, and here's the difference between all of the countries and the WHO. So I want to say some good things about the WHO and why what the WHO is doing is markedly different from your country, Vincent, my country, France, Belgium, Canada. The WHO is willing to do the following. They are willing to look at preprint data. They are willing to look at meta-analyses of all the randomized controlled trials. They are not sitting there saying, we need our big multi-center double-blind randomized controlled trial, a proper trial, a large trial. You know, what all of the other Western countries are saying, they refuse to look at these smaller trials. The WHO is amassing all of the evidence they can at their disposal. It is the most positive effort. Now, I haven't said there's going to be a positive outcome, but at least they're doing what I would want our healthcare leaders to be doing, which is look at all the positive evidence. The other thing I want to say about the WHO, and this was like, it warmed my heart. It literally warmed my heart. But there's a paper by Juan Chimie, Jennifer Hibbert, and David Scheim, where they did these epidemiologic analyses showing that ivermectin distribution campaigns had massive benefits in reducing deaths amongst populations in Peru. It is a phenomenal paper. It's a historic landmark paper. The WHO invited the senior author to present his analyses and his data. They are even looking at the epidemiologic data. Vincent, that's the other thing. These half-assed meta-analyses that these regulatory agencies like the NIH is putting up, notice not one regulatory agency, Netherlands, Belgium, France, ever talks about those epidemiologic analyses. No one has done a rebuttal, a refutal, or even a mention of them. They are so astounding. You've seen some of my lectures, Vincent, where I show those graphs time after time, region after region, country after country. You adopt the drug, the cases go down, and the deaths go down. Zimbabwe, mass importation, national guideline, 70 deaths a day within 6 weeks.
So everywhere except Europe and America, you know, not in your own country, not in Europe, not anywhere where there is a well-developed medical system, where there's systems in place which are high quality, that it's very difficult to basically accept them. Would this help if, Bill Gates and Melinda, they fund a global ivermectin clinical trial, and they think it should be available in about 2 months. Is that something which would help? Do they have the authority? Do they have the trust and authority to, if they come with an research that would be trusted?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't even want to touch that. I would say if it's a good trial, it should be trusted. If it's well designed,
this is Ontario. And large,
yeah, that doesn't mean anything to me. Come on. I've seen lots of crap trials from august institutions. But no, I've seen the trial protocol for this one. It actually looks pretty good. It's a good size. And I think this would finally move the needle. It seems that a good part of the Western world, again, is not going to do anything until one of these big trials is done. And, you know, so be it. People will die while waiting for, you know, pristine evidence. You've heard my opinion. I think this is all unnecessary. Myself, as well as a number of other groups, have determined that there is sufficient evidence. It is convincing, and there's enough evidence to deploy it as a systematic.
I know, but since that doesn't happen, I mean, you can jump up and down, you can scream at the camera.
Do the trial.
If there's a good trial, and is this a good trial, and if Bill and Melinda Foundation basically fund it, they cannot easily ignore it, right? I mean, so, but I think I expect that when we are vaccinated in the Netherlands, which I expect around, July, August or something like that, then we will get approval for ivermectin.
Probably, yeah. That wouldn't surprise me.
But what have you been doing this kind of stuff before, Pierre, to basically try to, basically convince everybody that there's something very simple that everybody should do and they don't want to listen?
Okay, so this is my third chapter in my life.
Mm-hmm.
The third chapter is ivermectin. The second chapter was corticosteroids in COVID, right? When I testified in May. The first battle I fought, and every battle I fought was with Dr. Merck, and now the last two chapters was with the FLCCC. But the first chapter was actually the use of high-dose intravenous ascorbic acid in septic shock. And that's a whole other episode, Vincent. But what I will tell you is we showed, and Dr. Merck showed, that it is profoundly life-saving in septic shock. So the world looked at his trial, and they have now done a number of randomized controlled trials, which are all negative. So we are up against the medical establishment, which has supposedly disproven the efficacy of ascorbic acid. Do you want to know something about every one of those randomized controlled trials?
Yeah, tell me.
The average time to initiation of the ascorbic acid in septic shock in the almost all of the trials was about 12 to 16 to 20 hours. It would be like waiting 16 hours to give someone antibiotics in septic shock. And I have data, which I've already published a preliminary study, and I'm going to publish a more definitive study later this year when I'm done here. But we show that if you give high-dose intravenous ascorbic acid within 6 hours of hitting the doors of the emergency room, pretty much nobody dies. After about 9 hours, it has very little effect. And after about 12 hours, it has zero effect. So the randomized control trials have all shown that if you give it 12, 16, 20 hours, it doesn't work.
Good. All right. I have a question here which we should come back to. You talked about this manuscript or recent publication.
Yeah.
Where can I find that? And basically, thank you, Damian, to basically get us back to it, because you wanted to have time for that manuscript. And how did it get accepted?
So Vince,
and where can I find the link?
Give you the 2-minute drill, that was we call it in the U.S. So number one, my manuscript went to Frontiers in Pharmacology, a prominent set of Swiss journals. It went through 3 rounds of peer review with 2 FDA peer reviewers, another senior governmental scientist who's now in the private sector. And it was a rigorous peer review, is accepted by their peer reviewers, and was supposed to be published. Long delays to publication were being held. We tried to investigate. We asked the journal what was happening.
Is it this one?
Yes. And what we found was that there was a special hold, and the editor of all the journals called in an external auditor who said, in his or her opinion, that our conclusions were unsupported, and they rejected our paper after passing peer review. Unprecedented in science. Unprecedented. After passing through 3 expert peer reviewers. So we were left without a publication. And I was trying to figure out where to submit. And I was looking at a few different journals. I got to tell you, I was so demoralized, Vincent, because submission, peer review, production, and publication takes months. For me to publish this paper again in another journal, it would be July before the world saw it. I reached out to a journal that had actually written to me months ago asking me to submit. And when I submitted it to the editor, he and I talked, and he told me it's called the American Journal of Therapeutics. And the editor, Dr. Peter Manu, he said that he would accept the peer reviews of Frontiers if he could see and document them. He carefully reviewed those senior scientist peer reviewers. He found them credible, meticulous, and rigorous.
It's called the American Journal of
Therapeutics, American Journal of Therapeutics. And so as of Monday this week, it has been accepted for publication. It is in production, and it will be online for print in about 2 to 3 weeks. And so the world will get to see this paper in April. And it concludes that ivermectin should be immediately and systematically adopted in the prevention and treatment of COVID-19.
Oh, okay. That guy, he basically sticks out his neck. So that is quite something.
You want to hear a joke, Vincent? When we announced that on Twitter, a lot of people tweeted back. They said, "Hey, when's Pharma going to show up in his office with a suitcase full of money?" And then he rejects the paper. I said, "No, I like this guy. He's a good editor. He's a very good guy. He gave it a very a thorough review, and I I trust him completely.
Okay. And so, and only when that comes out, we can read the article, or can we already read the article on
No,
on your website?
The preprint is on my website. You had it before. It's in that middle row on that green, those green boxes. That's where my paper is. So you can read the paper now. It'll be in a slightly different form when it's published because I had to remove a couple of things to shorten it. It's available to read now. It's on our website.
Yeah. Okay. And what does it, and what's the content of it? What does it basically say? What's your conclusion?
It reviews all of the trials on prevention of ivermectin and the prevention. It reviews all the trials on treatment, so observational as well as randomized. And then it does a thorough review of all of the real world epidemiologic data. And then after the review of that totality of evidence, which is consistent signals from observational, randomized, prevention, treatment, and epidemiologic trials showing profound effects on the disease, we conclude it should be the standard of care. And that is our new mission for the FLCCC for now. Our mission is to make sure the ivermectin is standard of care for the early and late treatment of all phases of COVID.
Where can I find the article here?
Right
This
here
one?
in the middle. So if you go to the third box down, boom, right there, ivermectin in the prophylaxis and treatment of COVID-19. Did you see that? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just share it with the people here.
And then Vince, did we talk about what's in our chat, the video premiere tonight of the panel?
I did that, but we can do that one more time. So this is the article, and it basically describes everything about this is your body of work. This is basically how you summarize everything, the reviews, the research, and your own opinion.
Yep.
The paper of.
Hey, Vincent, I have a meeting in a few. We're going long here. I have a competing engagement.
Yeah, you want to say you had enough, huh? And I think that's quite nice. We talked about 1 hour and 15 minutes. So listen, Pierre. I mean, let me then two small questions. Okay, we'll stop with the two small things. I mean, what is your family situation?
So my wife is a pulmonary and critical care specialist, just like me. We're from the same specialty. In fact, she's 3 years ahead of me in medicine. I was her medical student. I asked her out as a medical student, Vincent. I was wearing one of those short white coats, and she was this beautiful, important doctor who knew everything. And I worked with her for a month, and I asked her for a date. So my wife is the same doctor as I am, and we have 3 daughters, three beautiful girls.
Great, congratulations. Doesn't she think you're nuts with your battle?
Yeah, that's a whole other, that we could do an episode on what she thinks of me.
But I can imagine, I mean, you basically are not profiting from it. You get a lot of resistance. They basically tell you not to talk, to use the name of institutions. You went from one to another. I mean, you're paying a price for this battle.
The only thing that's bothered her really, well, there's multiple things. One is that I've been in this office since March of last year, on the phone around the clock. All I've done is COVID. I think I've abandoned or neglected my family, and that's what happens to physicians. And I've not done a good job with that. That's number one. Then the second thing she has a problem with is that I've lost 2 jobs during COVID. I've had to leave 2 institutions.
Yeah.
One was with her support. I left my first university job. I had already been tired of it for years. COVID it was the straw that broke the camel's back. I just said it's time for me to go. So she hasn't been happy about that, but I have, I've gone out there. I've done contract work. I've been running ICUs in COVID around the country. I went to New York for a month to help them out when they were getting buried in May. I went to Greenville, South Carolina for a few months, helped out their ICUs down there. And so I've been like an emergency ICU doctor. And so I've supported the family. So,
yeah.
I'm doing
well, I just want to tell you to basically thank her for allowing you to do this job and not basically, kicking you out of the house. The last very little question is what somebody wants to know here. What's your opinion on giving something as oxygen job? We have a test of that happening today.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a real quick opinion. So number one, my strong opinion is dexamethasone is the worst drug. It's not the best drug. It's the minimum of what you could do for a patient. The drug that should be used is methylprednisolone, number one. Number two, I would give corticosteroids to anyone with an abnormal X-ray or low oxygen. One of the two would be the indication for me. Once you have an abnormal X-ray where you can see those ground glass opacities on an X-ray, time for the steroids. So one of those two things would be the trigger for me. The third thing I would say is the doses that are being used around the world are almost completely insufficient. They are failing the many and saving the few. You need to use higher doses, at least 1 milligram per kilogram of methylprednisolone. And that's my statement on steroids.
Okay, Pierre, you're waking up. You got your coffee.
Yes.
We have your enthusiasm. You're ready for your next appointment. Thank you very much from Europe. We'll talk again. Bye.
And then remember the premiere of the panel tonight. That was a great panel discussion. It'll be on our YouTube channel.
Yeah. I will do that. Wait 1 second. That is in here. So tonight, describe what we can what we will get tonight.
On our YouTube channel, at that link, we're going to post a video of this international press conference and this international panel discussion. It was a great discussion, great questions from the media, lots of information. And what I love about it is it's not just me. You know, you get to hear from another group of international experts, different perspective, different expertise. And so I just thought it was a really broad discussion and a broad, foundation of support. I'm going to be moderating. Apparently, the team said, why don't you moderate on chat? So I don't type perfectly, but, I'll be able to dialogue with anyone who wants to dialogue with me on chat during it.
Okay. So I think we're all very grateful for your time, Pierre, and your battle. And I'm looking at you, and I think it's quite remarkable how fiery you are after being 1 year in your room and not getting much appreciation. Well, you get a lot of appreciation from other people, but you don't get a lot of appreciation about the standard medical world. And I think you have to have a thick skin for that. So.
Vincent, you've caught me on some bad days too. So you're catching me on a good day today. Not every day is like this. So I'm glad to talk to you today. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, everybody says thanks here. Bye.
Awesome.
And thank you
Thanks,
very much
guys.
for all your questions, and we'll talk to you.